CX professionals require a vast knowledge of, well, basically a little bit of everything.
You need a very vast skill set for this work. A lot of times people starting in this space are overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that they need. But what I encourage them to do is just dig in and learn.
A discussion on the evolution of customer experience and the diverse skill set needed by CX pros on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, I'm Steve Walker, Chairman and CEO of Walker Information and also the host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. On the CX Leader Podcast, we explore topics and themes to help leaders like you leverage all the benefits of your customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. Really, a big thank you to all of our listeners for the success of the CX Leader Podcast. It's really been a lot of fun this year, producing a new episode every week. And right now we're in the middle of our multi-part series where we're introducing you to some of the luminaries of the customer experience world. These CX rock stars have unique perspectives on today's business environments and how customer experience should fit into the strategic planning of any business. I am honored that my guest for this episode has more than 20 years of experience in building and growing customer and employee engagement. In 2011, she founded Customer Experience Catalysts, a thought leadership and consultancy practice helping brands identify and optimize their opportunities to engage customers and associates. Today, Diane Magers is the interim CEO of Customer Experience Professional Association, also known as CXPA, and is joining me via Skype. Diane, I've known you for a long time, but really delighted to have you as a first-time guest on the CX Leader Podcast.
I am super delighted to be here. Thanks so much.
Well, we're just really having a lot of fun with this Luminary series, and I know you'll have a lot to add to the topic. But for those who don't know you as well as we do here at Walker, why don't you give us just a little more color on your background and really how you got to this point and what your career's entailed?
Oh my goodness, yeah, I'll give you the elevator story. Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but I started out as a clinical psychologist by trade. I got my master's and I practiced psychology for quite some time. So I've always been in the study of human behavior, and so it fits uniquely into this space because, as you know, we're dealing with human beings and we're not predictable. We're not, we carry a lot of emotions. We're just a bundle of open, raw nerves running around the planet. So it really did lend a good bent into what I'm doing today. After I left psychology, I was working with emotionally disturbed adolescent girls, which is sometimes an oxymoron. I decided to leave for a while, and I had a friend of mine beginning a business in the basement of his home. And he asked me to come in. He said, "You'd be really good at sales and marketing. Why don't you come work with me? I'm starting this company, a little startup." And we grew up from 4 people to 400 in a little over 4 years. So I learned everything about opening, running a business, from data to policies and procedures to HR to manufacturing and operations. And that was really, I think, and if I talk about my background a little bit, that's the one thing I think that really opened my eyes and made me capable of being a practitioner in the CX space. So fast forward a little bit, after I sold that company, I went to work for a division of Cisco Foods in sales and marketing, and my CEO was a luminary himself, Greg Marshall, and he just believed that we need to do things by the customer, based on what they needed. So he supported us listening and building out our applications, processes, people, everything related to customers. And that was successful in and of itself. And then I was asked to go down to corporate Cisco to build the same program and discipline there. And that was a huge undertaking because we not only did that, kind of basing everything on the customer, but we also did a major SAP implementation and really went through a true business transformation project, which again, alluded me to many of the skill sets that were going to be necessary for me to continue in customer experience. I left there after 17 years and went a couple years on my own, partnering with people who are just getting started, because in that point in time, there's a lot of people doing that. And then went to work for AT&T in their business-to-business space for about 3 years, helping them to understand and build those very complex relationships with many, many products. And left there, and about that time, I took the position, had been a member of CXPA since its beginning, and had been on the board, and they offered me the position of coming on as chairman. And so I started there, and then we were growing so rapidly and doing a lot of things we needed to do to kind of, build the organization up. And so I stepped into this interim CEO position, and I've been doing that ever since.
Wow, what a great trip. It's really retrospective on the whole industry and how the whole thing has evolved, really.
It has. I tell people starting now, I say, you put on your helmet and buckle your seatbelt, because it really can be a very tumultuous but very exciting ride. You need a very vast skill set for this work, and nobody comes to the table with all of those skills. They don't come talking about data on one hand and emotions on the other, and content management and marketing and operations. There's very few people who are that diverse in their skill set and their understanding. And so we find a lot of times people starting in this space are overwhelmed by the amount of knowledge that they need. But what I encourage them to do is just dig in and learn, because the more you learn about data and digital and technology, and the more use at UX, the more you learn about those things, the more powerful and influential you can be, because you'll be working alongside those people and not just kind of saying, go do this, and not really understanding what you're asking them to do. And I think that's really where your influence can come in, where you're truly what I call the mortar between the bricks. You're able to understand the bricks, and you're able to pull them together and connect those dots.
Well, you said quite a few things in there that touched on some of my feelings about this field and this area of CX as a profession. One of the things is that you didn't really get into it on purpose. It just sort of happened. Although you had a background in social sciences, and I think that's something we see typical. Not too many people studied to become, a CX professional, but one of the things I've observed is that they tend to have sort of good grounding in social sciences.
Yes.
They're sort of curious about why people do things the way they do. And then you also were the beneficiary of some great role models, some mentors, and being involved in organizations that were pioneering in the customer experience space. And actually, that leads me into my next topic. You've been around this space for a long time. A lot of people are just really discovering it. It's like it's the new buzzword, CX and stuff. But give us a little retrospective. And you've already kind of touched on that in your background and how your career evolved. But, just from your standpoint, and now you're leading the CXPA, which is really the formalization of the profession. But just give us a little perspective on what you think were some of the events that really led to where we are today.
I believe our profession came because organizations truly were looking for someone to be that glue or that connector between the different business units and the parts of an organization. Because customers were becoming more demanding and more in control, businesses didn't have any excuse or reason to stay operating the way that they were. I often say that customer experience has been a catalyst for changing the way organizations work. They can't work in silos anymore. And so it takes someone with this type of ability to helicopter up, ability to connect the dots, ability to bring things together. And I think when people started to realize that customer experience professionals, because they were able to start with the customer and bring that outside in, as we all know, is kind of the moniker of what we do, that outside in approach really woke up corporations and allowed them to begin to look at themselves differently, and they realized they had to behave differently. So CX was really, for me, more of a transformative role that needed a name, and because it was about the customer, about the experience, that's why we came to be. Now, I think that we're going to see that morph even more. I call it the engagement ecosystem. it is about customer experience, but it's also now about the employee experience. And I don't mean engagement, meaning ask your employees to do more for less, or smile when they answer the phone type of discretionary effort, but more about really understanding their experience as a customer of the brand. And there's also suppliers and partners and constituents and all sorts of different people who are a part of the ecosystem of a business. And if that wasn't enough, CX professionals, as we continue to grow and develop, will have to think about how the Internet of experiences, the Internet of things, Internet of experiences, the Internet of brands, and how we work together as brands. Like I joke about this, but you know that Uber was testing bringing Starbucks to you when you ordered your Uber. And that requires brands to work together. And so designing experiences, even intra-brand, across brands, will be something that will find this particular very unique skill set of what CX professionals do today will be highly desirable in the future.
Obviously, CXPA is still a relatively new organization, but growing fast.
Yeah.
You know, so many companies are so immature in their approach. Where do you think we're at in the evolution of the profession?
The evolution of CX has been extraordinary to watch. I think that there's quite a spectrum of where organizations are. So when I think about the professional and I think about the profession, I think both of those entities are learning that it is not just about surveys and metrics, numbers and scoring, and more explicitly, they're starting to truly understand this more holistic nature of what they need to do, that this encompasses a big transformation for an organization, that it is a shift in the way organizations think and work, and therefore you have to shift a lot of things in the organization. That's a lot of change. And so I think today we have people on different parts of the spectrum who are either, happy with, hey, I know what my score is and I'm, getting feedback from customers and I'm doing some things to improve, kind of that find and fix, all the way to what we're seeing more now of is people are starting to understand a more holistic approach of how to work interdisciplinary, how to work across the silos, how to bring people together, how to really truly innovate, how to be a change agent for their customers and their clients. And so we see, I think, the shift and the wave happening where people are starting to understand more about the holistic nature of this profession.
My guest today on the CX Leader podcast is Diane Magers, and she is the interim CEO of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. Diane has over 20 years of experience in the CX, really has seen CX become what it is today at a number of different levels. You know, you've used the term transformation, I think, several times in our discussion today. That really is the role of the CX leader, right, is to drive transformation. So what are kind of the most important qualities of a CX leader inside of an organization?
Oh, if I had to say what I wish I would have done or what I counsel, or mentor people to do today is I did not know enough about change management. And, even as a psychologist, I understood human beings, but I didn't understand how to define and bring people along and build a good change management program and really structure and manage that just as importantly as I would any other project that was going on in any of the organizations I talked about. So I think that is part of a transformation. I think a lot of times when people run into, opportunities and they get stuck or they hit an obstacle, it typically isn't because they're not really doing the right things. They have the projects running, they're doing the right things. But the things are just those. They're just things. If you're not bringing the people along and transforming them at the same time in order to understand their part in what they do for the organization, how it can be different, how they can change experiences and have impact on each other's lives as well as customers' lives, and really focus on that, I think that would be one of the things I would say is a transformative skill set.
Well, that leads me to one of my favorite questions to ask our guests, and that's the part of the show we call take-home value. So again, if I am a new or even maybe a somewhat experienced CX executive, What's one thing I could start working on tomorrow that could really help my professional development?
Learn about change. Learn about innovation. Learn about how to drive change. Because both internally and externally, you will be called on to help your organization in all of those ways, in every single part of what you do. And so developing that skill set. I would learn as much as I could from your executives and really walk alongside them in their shoes, understanding where they are, what they're trying to accomplish, but also do that for middle management, every single person in the organization as much as possible. But learning all the different components of business so you can stitch them together, I think is another critical approach and something that I would have done much earlier in my career as well.
Now, Diane, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. You mentioned change and innovation as some skills that the CX leader wants to develop. Where do you see the profession going over, say, the next 3 to 5 years?
We have strategy teams today. We have customer experience teams today. And I believe that those two pieces of what is occurring in organization today, where you're going, where you're headed, and how that's going to work, will kind of mold into one. We see chief experience officers coming into play. And I believe that's because people are realizing that it doesn't matter what experience is happening with the organization, whether it's supplier, employee, or customer, that the organization needs to really take this vantage point and perspective from outside themselves and embrace other organizations, embrace what change is happening, embrace innovation. And I don't know what it'll be called, but it almost seems like there's this welcoming kind of Chief Charismatic Officer that's really pulling all those things in, bringing them to bear, designing the experiences, and then helping the organization continue to really innovate and be relative to any constituent, any customer, any employee.
We might have to change the name of the podcast to the Chief Charismatic Officer Leader Podcast. I love that. No, in fact, we referenced a couple times, and one of the things that we've used a lot is the top 10 traits of the CX professional. It really is a role that requires sort of a jack of all trades and a master of a few.
Okay.
But I think the whole concept of what you've talked about here today is how you got to engage other people. You got to lift other people and bring other people along. That was one of our takes on the top 10 traits is not everybody can be perfect at all of them. So, one of the roles of the CX leader is to engage other people and to have other people fill in for where it's not your top skill. And in doing that, you build up other leaders in the organization.
It does. I always say it takes a village to raise a customer experience. And that is so true because not everyone has all that knowledge. Even though I encourage people to really learn a lot and be very holistic in their approach, it's just impossible to be everywhere at once. So not only are you learning from other folks, but you're also creating mini-me's. Because the more that we can convert and turn on light bulbs for other folks in the organization, that whole change management aspect you talked about in your awesome white paper, it's really about that. It's really about being a catalyst for change. It's getting people to see something different than they saw yesterday, and how they think and act and actually how they feel about it. And so finding those people whose light bulbs come on very quickly and shine very bright, bring those people under your fold. They have just as much passion as you do. They just need to channel it. If they've got that light bulb shining bright, then wrap it around your Christmas tree, as I say. Just make it a party. Bring those people on board. And that's what makes this job so exciting. That's what makes this career something that people aspire to be, because they see the impact that they can have on individuals. They see the impact they can have on their organizations. And it's, while, as I said at the beginning, very tumultuous, lots and lots of hard work, it really is why the profession is so rewarding.
Hey, Diane, really delighted to have you on as a guest. Is there anything else that we didn't hit on or didn't touch on that you'd want to make sure that our listeners got to hear from you today?
Yeah, I think we solved world peace, so I think we're good.
Diane Magers is the interim CEO of the Customer Experience Professional Association. Diane, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Just for make sure people know how to get a hold of you and know what the CXPA is, you want to give a little bit of contact information and how folks might be able to get in touch with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's super simple. It's Diane, Diane, at cxpa.org, or you can go right to cxpa.org and go to the info button and contact us there. We'd love to have you be part of our community. We'd love to have you be part of our family, and we'd love for you to learn more about this career.
Yeah, and anybody that's a listener of this podcast that hasn't checked out the CXPA, we definitely want you to do that. And it is a great community of professionals that's supporting each other and really supporting the importance that customers and employees bring to businesses. Thanks again to Diane, and if there's anything you want to talk to me about or anything that we've discussed on this or previous episodes of the podcast, we'd love to be able to talk to you. So you can contact me here at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me at 1-317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the other great people here at Walker, and we'd love to talk to you more. Don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts, and you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and we even now have our own YouTube channel, youtube.com/walkerinformation. Thank you for listening to this episode of the CX Leader podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you again here next time.